You're listening to a Roddenberry Podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. We'll have more news this evening, but first...
The latest Gene-ology, a Roddenberry Podcast.
Episode 90, A.P.O. 923. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Earl Green.
And I'm Ashley Thomas.
In each edition of Gene-ology, we scale the mysterious mountain of Gene Roddenberry's early TV scripts and shows long before he created Star Trek. Oh, and we might not even be telling anyone we're doing that. Whoops.
But before we're declared AWOL, we report back on any morals, messages, and meanings we find in Gene's early work and compare it to what came later.
This week, we're in the Army now, and various other branches of the service, with A.P.O. 923, a pilot Gene wrote for Screen Gems, which produced it to sell to CBS in 1962, but CBS didn't bite.
Before we ponder how that happened, let me take a brief moment to encourage you to join our Patreon, or follow us on YouTube, or leave a review wherever you're listening to us.
Patreon is your gateway to all things Mission Log, including exclusive access to the unedited version of our show, codename The Them, and our private Discord where you can interact with us, your hosts, during scheduled live chats, along with occasional screenings. You can access all this for just $1 a month. Head over to patreon.com/missionlog to see what tier works for you and join the conversation.
By the way, folks, reviews do help our shows way more than you know. Even if you can't come up with the words for a written review, a 5-star rating really does go a long way to tell the algorithm that you like us, you love us, you want some more of us, you want some more Gene-ology in your mailbox, please and thank you, and that other people might like us too. We are counting on our loyal Gene-ologists to help us spread the word. And now, this week's trivia. Earl, I believe we've got some trivia in the mail for us today. You want to tell us all about it?
We have a whole mountain, a mystery mountain of trivia, no less. A long-simmering project during Gene's time at Screen Gems, A.P.O. 923, sometimes alternately known as Wild Blue Yonder, was more autobiographical than most of Gene's work, as it was based in the South Pacific Theater during World War II, a setting Gene knew all too well from his own time as a bomber pilot. But while the subject matter was from Gene's past, the pitch document for A.P.O. 923 was definitely looking toward the future, and it reads like Gene is summing up the history of the medium since he wrote his first script. Here's an excerpt. Before getting down to specifics, some pertinent thoughts about trends in television. Personally, we do not like entertainment cycles or death and taxes, but they exist. Unfortunately, the moment a fresh television concept is born, it immediately has a dozen imitators. Every possible switch, angle, and gimmick is applied, and for a year or two, the public is fed a diet of lookalikes. Eventually, the cycle comes to an end, but only because it has been squeezed, drained, and milked dry. Certain of these past trends read, in retrospect, as clear as a Rand McNally roadmap. In the beginning, after the wrestling matches, there were the dramatic anthologies and the variety shows. Next came an epidemic of audience participation and quiz shows. Then the name personalities who appeared in a number of half-hour dramatic shows. Then came the police shows, the family situation comedy, the explosive rush of westerns, a dermatitis which may yet reoccur in time. Then the private eyes mushroomed, and finally the organized criminals started to move in, and with them the investigators and crusaders to see that they didn't get away with too much hell. Concurrently, the big swing to animated cartoons, and recently a couple of doctors have poked their noses into the scene, although this can't really be construed as a trend just yet. We haven't told you anything you don't already know, but this rehash does pointedly remind all of us, like it or not, television is a cyclical business. We do not recommend fighting it. we recommend beating it. We suggest that instead of joining the rear ranks of the parade after it's already past the reviewing stand, we try leading it. We know the demands of television make some news cycle inevitable. All our research, experience, and instincts tell us the war cycle is next. And that's just the opening salvo. Gene next spends several pages explaining why wartime exploits have all the makings of the next cycle of TV storytelling, all of which, in retrospect, seems delightfully naive from a vantage point in the present, where we now know Vietnam was lurking just around the corner, and that war would no longer mean escapist heroics from a time now past. But whatever the outcome and however history was determined to laugh at the notion of war as entertainment, Gene was right on the money about one thing elsewhere in this document. Hollywood had turned American-centric retellings of World War II, now nearly 20 years in the rearview mirror, into a string of recent theatrical hits, and novelists had been mining the war for stories even longer than that. It was inevitable that it would come to the small screen, and in some respects, forthcoming shows like Combat would even prove to be at least a little bit Vietnam-proof. However ethically complicated current conflicts were, tales of World War II offered the moral certitude of the Allies fighting the good and just fight. When Gene gets down to describing his concept in particular, things start sounding somewhat familiar. A.P.O. 923 is an unusual concept in that it incorporates strong continuing characters, returning week to week to familiar locales, yet allows for all the limitless scope of the anthology. Okay, if you swap out returning week to week to familiar locales with boldly going to seek out new life and new civilizations, you might be onto something there, Gene. Okay, let's get back to Gene's document. The time, 1943. The locale, A.P.O. 923, the military post office designation for a base somewhere in the South Pacific. It might actually be New Guinea, the Solomons, Caledonia. Take your choice. The leading characters. Philip Pike, Captain, 28th Heavy Bombardment Squadron and skipper of the B-17 Yankee Doodle. Edward Conway Jellicoe, Lieutenant, Junior Grade, U.S. Navy, attached to Operations Offices for Command. James Irvine, 2nd Lieutenant, United States Army Services of Supply, attached to headquarters of the Chief Signal Officer. Locally known as the Joint Chiefs of Staff, these three men comprise the most effective and imaginative trio of operators anywhere south of the equator. It was neither compatibility nor a common background that brought them together, belonging to different services arms, highly individualistic, fiercely independent. They clash constantly, but have nevertheless been welded together by a simple common denominator, the love of the finer things of life and an ability to get them, even under the impossible conditions of Pacific War service. If you were expecting Gene to spend the entire series telling us war is hell, you might have been tuning in for the wrong show, because Gene's aim with A.P.O. 923 was to revisit World War II through a more comedic lens of what happens between missions and dangerous assignments. He cites the musical South Pacific as an inspiration. Had it gone to series, A.P.O. 923 might have beaten MASH to some of its punches, though the pilot doesn't necessarily succeed in showing the lighter side of service in the Pacific theater. Gene's description of Captain Philip Pike. He guides himself by a set of practical ideals, not cheating at poker, never racing on a sure thing, and not beating women or dogs. All of which makes more sense than many a more complex philosophy. Tremendously respected, he's the one officer at A.P.O. 923 with a standing welcome at all NCO and EM shacks. His weakness is a tremendous, almost insatiable curiosity about the enemy, the next island, the taste of native brew, or how it feels for an airman to go along on a PT boat mission. He has many friends among the islanders, white and brown. It's difficult not to like him. Pike was played by Ralph Tager in this pilot, an actor who made the guest starring rounds, but had also scored 2 series lead roles prior to this pilot. He starred alongside James Coburn in the 1960 series Klondike, and then worked in another series a year later with Coburn, titled Acapulco. After A.P.O. 923 came and went, Tager landed another series lead, this time in the 1967 series adaptation of the John Wayne movie Hondo, with Ralph taking over the role of embittered Army Scout Hondo Lane. The series didn't last long, disappearing from the schedule after only 17 episodes. Ralph returned to the guest starring circuit until the early 80s, opting to run a firewood company, which later ran into some legal trouble. Ralph died in 2015. Of Lieutenant Edward Jellicoe, Gene writes, Jellicoe has learned to be a superior seaman, immensely better than if he had served in a cruiser or battle wagon. Now, instead of having been separated from the ocean by foot-thick steel, he's fought the sea on a highly personal basis, that of a sailor who has had tides, currents, and reefs shake his stomach loose from his rib cage. He refuses to accept the fact of this knowledge, protesting constantly that he is assigned improperly. Jellicoe is extremely well-liked by the enlisted grades, not because they feel a kinship as with Pike, but because Ed Jellicoe is an officer and a gentleman in the old-fashioned sense, a man who believes his first responsibility is toward the men under him. He sees they sleep in the driest ground, eat first, and get a fair share of any pie. And since he feels the social equal of any admiral, he's not adverse to charging into the command shack and arguing with the startled old man on any injustice he's come across. If Jellicoe is ever wrong on his facts and regulations, the admiral is going to flay him alive. Eddie has no intentions of ever making that mistake. Eddie Jellicoe. Boy, that name sounds familiar. I can't place where I've heard it before. Is played by Pat Harrington Jr. over a decade before he became a very familiar face in American primetime, playing Snyder in over 200 episodes of the sitcom One Day at a Time. He lent his voice to characters in the animated Addams Family, Captain Caveman, and Scooby-Doo, in addition to making frequent TV guest appearances on more shows than you can count. We lost Pat in 2016. And finally, some highlights from Gene's description of Second Lieutenant James T. Irvine. Although without formal training, he borders on being a communications genius, a radio ham par excellence. He can assemble a working transmitter out of equipment considered battle-damaged beyond repair. It is his job to keep radio parts and equipment in the hands of the many agents, civilian and military, behind Japanese lines in this island chain. Having combat infantry experience, he can take the equipment there if necessary. Irvine's genius for gadgeteering makes him indispensable to the Joint Chiefs. He is a compulsive go-getter, can make anything out of anything, a soda water dispenser out of a fire extinguisher and a discarded oxygen bottle, an efficient alcohol still out of discarded washing machine tubes and tank, and an ice-making machine out of a discarded Jeep motor. Playing Irvine, we have James Stacy. Now, we've seen him before. He was the referee in charge of timing the wrestling matches back in the West Point episode, The Command, which we covered in podcast number 21. He also appeared in episodes of Highway Patrol, Shannon, and Have Gun Will Travel, but this would be the only time after West Point that he would appear in something written by Gene Roddenberry. I will warn you that the rest of Mr. Stacy's biography is not for the faint of heart. He would go on to star in the Western Lancer for 2 seasons beginning in 1968, and though he continued landing guest starring parts, he lost his left arm and leg in a motorcycle accident in 1973, an accident that his girlfriend did not survive. To say that this limited the parts he could play on film would be an understatement, but he did keep working, appearing in movies like Posse and Something Wicked This Way Comes, and putting in TV appearances on Cagney and Lacey, Highway to Heaven, and the new WKRP in Cincinnati. Shortly after this, however, an arrest and conviction involving sexually abusing a minor brought his career to a stop. After a failed suicide attempt, he served 6-year jail sentence for those charges. James Stacy also died in 2016. A minor point of trivia, he was briefly married to Kim Darby after she played Miri on Star Trek in the late 60s. Potential secondary characters are discussed more briefly, including a dog named Trigger, the base commandant, the special service officer handling USO tour visits, the wax, the waves, you name it. As Gene writes in closing, sooner or later they all set foot on A.P.O. 923, and sooner or later they are bound to end up in one of our stories. Names and situational setups are starting to feel distinctly familiar here, as any seasoned fan of Star Trek The Next Generation or Star Trek Prodigy knows. The Enterprise D was briefly commanded by a Captain Edward Jellicoe, who later pinned on Admiral Stars and Prodigy, and surely this can't be a coincidence, except that the Edward Jellicoe in Star Trek lore was introduced in Chain of Command, a two-parter written and produced a year after Gene died. It is possible that Gene might have discussed A.P.O. 923 with the writers of Chain of Command, which included Ronald D. Moore, but only Ron Moore would know that for sure. We have a motley mix of material that we're drawing from here: Gene's pitch document, a number of episodic story treatments that Gene had ready to show the potential range and reach of his proposed series, and thanks to Jeff Sabucat Joseph, we have the pilot itself, though a little bit of the beginning of the show is missing. However, this is the only copy in circulation, and we're extremely lucky to have access to it. You can watch it at Sabucat's YouTube channel, like we did. The music is by Leith Stevens. Leith was also responsible for the score from George Powell's War of the Worlds. And while there isn't a lot of scoring in this pilot, I do want to give him full credit for the super jazzed up medley of the anthems of all the branches of the armed forces over the end credits. Now put a pin in that, because it feels like we are prototyping the main theme from the Lieutenant here. The director of this pilot was George Sherman, who began his directing career with Republic Pictures in the 1930s. A.P.O. 923 was one of only a few TV directing credits he accumulated in the 60s. George was regarded as a solid, reliable feature film director with dozens of movies to his credit. He stayed behind the camera through the late 70s, with his biggest small-screen contribution being a dozen episodes of the Fess Parker Daniel Boone series, spanning that show's first 3 seasons. George, who once said filmmaking was the only occupation he knew, died in 1991.
My entire operation could hang on one radio being able to transmit the right message at the right minute. Now, I shouldn't have to tell you what the weather conditions are here or what they do to communications equipment. And I certainly shouldn't have to tell you that I cannot load down my radar groups with technicians and spare parts.
Answer. James T. Irvine and a parachute.
Or on some islands he'll go in by sub or PT boat. The man is a 1 in a million combination. He's able to use a knife and a gun to get where we want him. He's able to keep our transmitter going with baling wire and chewing gum.
The job's so rough the Signal Corps would loan him to you only if he volunteered.
How does this concern you?
Friendship. I got a feeling you did your recruiting with your knee. Real low.
Captain Pike, if Jimmy Irvine were my own brother, I could not be more fond of him. And I'll tell you this, I'd still give him a knee if 100 men's lives depended on it, and that doesn't mean that I would enjoy it.
Off the record, Colonel, speaking of your hypothetical brother, supposing he'd already done more than his share. Supposing you pushed him a little bit too far, so he decides to hole up.
Well, I would hope that my brother's friends would see to it that he doesn't. Because there is absolutely nothing hypothetical about what I would have to do to a deserter.
Act 1. James T. Jimmy Irvine is being congratulated on his recent receipt of the Silver Star. James is less enthused. One of his men found a photograph on the body of one of their attackers. It was a picture of the man's wife and child, now widowed and orphaned. Jimmy wants out. But the Army wants him back in. If he does, his expertise could save many men from having their bodies sent home to their wives and children. But before he can respond, shots ring out. It's a raid on the supply depot. Jimmy reluctantly grabs his gun and runs out. The soldiers fend off the raiders. Jimmy searches the body of one of the dead men, and instead of a photograph, finds an apple. Cut to the airfield. Pike's got plane trouble. Jellicoe, the Navy Lieutenant J.G., picks him up, and the two of them go round up Jimmy. It's time for a convening of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for Operation Hand Crank. Jimmy puts a device in the back of the Jeep, but tries to beg off the operation. He's got a mission to prep for, courtesy of an old CO. But wait, it's not for Colonel Crow, who just flew in to organize a new commando outfit, is it? Jellicoe and Pike protest Jimmy's involvement, but he changes the subject and agrees to go along with them for Operation Hand Crank. And with that, he jumps in the Jeep, and they're off. Act 2. The Joint Chiefs arrive at Tapioca's bar and place their hand crank machine on the bar. In the Mood by the Glenn Miller Orchestra is playing, and men are seated around the bar, playing cards and enjoying a drink. Jim asks Tapioca, the bartender, where an apple could have come from. Tapioca says high up in the mountains. Jim then asks for a pitcher of water, and the demonstration of their hand crank machine begins. Jellicoe turns the crank on the device, and wait, that's no ordinary device. That's an ice maker. 4 bits and that Jamba Juice you're drinking is going to taste like bottled and bond. The Joint Chiefs are making bank hand over fist. Tapioca's gears are turning now. He's going to need this hand crank ice machine. But before any negotiations can begin, Tapioca pauses. He hears planes overhead. But are they Japanese? The bar goes quiet. Then boom! The lights flash, and the firing of artillery rattles the bar. The men rush out the door, save for Pike and Jellicoe. They can't figure out what's up with Jimmy tonight. He's usually a barrel of laughs, but not this evening. They think this mission he's got himself trapped into has him rattled. But he's got too much pride to turn it down. Jellicoe thinks he's scared, and when a man's scared like that, he starts looking for another way out. They step outside and find Jim hunkered down with Tapioca, deep in conversation. Cut to Colonel Crow, talking about how strange it is that they're being hit by stragglers for guns and ammo, but no, he isn't volunteering to go chase them either. He can spare Corporal Tennyson and a walkie-talkie, but the captain has guessed it. The entire operation hangs on someone transmitting the right message at the right moment, but the weather plays havoc with the comms equipment, and they can't weigh the men down toting extra parts for repair. Solution? James T. Irvine and a parachute. His skills rival MacGyver to keep the equipment going, and he can get where they need him to with only a knife and a gun. But Jim can't be ordered to do this mission. He has to volunteer. Captain Pike thinks Colonel Crow has voluntold Jim to do it with a knee to the pants. Colonel Crow says he cares for Jimmy like his own brother, but he'd give Jim a knee if he felt 100 men's lives depended upon it, though he wouldn't feel great about giving him the knee either. But Pike counters. Suppose he's pushed Jimmy a little too far. What if he decides to go hole up? What would he do with his hypothetical brother then? Well, the consequences of desertion are not hypothetical. Act 3. Pike and Jellicoe are out on the boat in the dock, and Jellicoe is about to give the recitation of a letter to a girl back home, Emmy Lou. She's the daughter of the owner of the company he worked for back there. Jellicoe is writing in hopes that he'll hold her interest until he's home in 2 years, though they are not officially dating. She's only 16 after all. Colonel Crow enters the scene and makes note that a jeep, some sea rations, a tarp, and a bedroll are missing from the supply. That sounds suspiciously like someone's gone AWOL. Pike and Jellicoe excuse themselves from the conversation. Cut to Tapioca, seated in a wicker chair like a king and surrounded by natives. Pike and Jellicoe enter the scene and ask if he's seen Jim. Tapioca denies seeing him, but they notice the ice in his glass. Jim has sold Tapioca the ice machine, but for what? They take the ice machine back on the grounds that it was owned by the three of them, not just Jim. Tapioca is a little more willing to trade now, but he doesn't want to give away any information about Jim, which is exactly what they want. Pike and Jellicoe negotiate a trade with him. The ice machine for a trip up in the mountains to a village with fresh produce and beautiful half-white women. That sounds like a place Jim would like. It's a deal. Pike and Jellicoe are on their way. Cut to a group of Japanese soldiers in the forest, arming themselves and preparing for battle. They've been spotted by a scouting party who have phoned in the information. The army are on their way. Meanwhile, Pike and Jellicoe have picked up Jim's trail, stopping at his abandoned jeep hidden in the bush. Pike and Jellicoe now have to follow the trail on foot. They take the trail until they come across a pond where 3 women are bathing, splashing in the water. Distracted by the pretty ladies, Jim sneaks up on Pike and Jellicoe. "Why did you take this unauthorized vacation, Jim?" He's got his reasons, and he'll show them. Jim takes them to a hidden Chinese village. The men slowly enter the village, guns out, but not on the defensive. The villagers look at them in silence until a child goes to get the village elder. The elder greets them, but tries to send the men away, saying they have no food, their women are old and ugly, their animals are diseased, and they are very poor. Nothing for them to steal. The men assure them that they are not here to steal, but come in friendship. The elder says the tiger always smiles when entering the goat pen. The men ask if they get many soldiers up here, since they seem skittish of uniforms. Just then, the wife of the village elder enters the scene with a small troop of guards, bearing guns and taking charge of things. The couple explains that they have been on the run from war all the way from Taipei. "The world is on fire with soldiers," she exclaims. With that, planes zoom past overhead. The elder then asks, "Do you want to show courage? The greatest courage is not to kill, even in the face of death." Mrs. Village Elder sends her honor guard away. Mr. Village Elder then offers the Joint Chiefs the hospitality of their village. Pike and Jellicoe are still waiting for answers from Jim, but he can't share his suspicions without more evidence. The men take a look around the village. Cut to the Japanese soldiers. They found the hidden jeeps, and now are on the trail. Off they go. Back at the village, the Joint Chiefs are seated in the home of the village elder, Mr. Wong, enjoying the meal set before them. They have an idea that maybe if they scrounged up some trucks, they could work out a deal with the village to sell their produce. They'd be the produce kings of the island. But Wong shoots them down. Soldiers steal. Soldiers kill. Mrs. Wong presses him and suggests that they may be telling the truth. But Mr. Wong isn't swayed, though he admits that for soldiers, they have waited with great patience and courtesy. With a clap, he summons 3 beautiful young women. The Joint Chiefs are not upset by this happenstance. Mr. Wong says they are to be a gift to them as servants trained in cooking and cleaning of clothes. But the Joint Chiefs, while very flattered, must object. Their base is all male, and 3 beautiful women would make, problems. Wong says that the lack of females on base is the problem, but the Joint Chiefs must respectfully decline, so Wong sends them away. Jim presses Wong, asking when the soldiers who might do evil will be back. He even goes as far to suggest that while Wong refuses to fight back, he is allowing even more killing to happen than he would if he were to defend his village. Jim figured out the village's location based on where someone could grow an apple, dry soil, and cool nights. That could only be found in a high mountain valley. Also, the bag he took it from was stitched up with machine stitches. Mrs. Wong says it's time for the truth. She says when night comes, Japanese soldiers will also come. Mr. Wong echoes, "If you are found here, our whole village dies." The men stand up with a start. Cut back to the Japanese soldiers. They're finding their way up the trail, closing in on the Joint Chiefs. Meanwhile, back at the village, the Joint Chiefs have put their helmets back on and are armed. Jim has gone to inspect an entry point to the village. Jim has tried to negotiate with Mr. Wong, but he will not agree. He believes the Japanese soldiers have probably already spotted their jeeps and will not wait for nightfall. Little does he know how right he is. The Japanese soldiers await just outside the village. The Joint Chiefs need something from Jimmy, though. The truth. Jim admits that, he was scared. He was scared of letting the men on his team down because he couldn't kill again. But it would also put them in harm's way if he doesn't. The village they're at now is the entirety of their own country in a nutshell. They put off joining the war as long as they could, but now it's at their door and there's no way around it. Pike and Jellicoe would like to go back to base to get their boats and planes, but they're going to have to do this army style. The village scout spots the Japanese soldiers from a distance and sounds the alarm. That's their cue. Jim tells Pike and Jellicoe that they've got to flank them. It's their only chance. He's got an idea. Jim hands his gun, helmet, and ammunition to one of the villagers, and instead runs into the forest with his knife. He ambushes their scout, stabbing him and stealing his gun. He then goes after the other scout, fighting him down and stabbing him with his own bayonet. The Japanese soldiers have stumbled across the men that Jim took out, but they press on. Jim, however, lies in wait, taking out the straggler at the end. The Japanese enter the village. It's quiet, that is, until fire rings out from either side. Both the chiefs and the village people take aim at the Japanese until it's time to reload. There's a brief pause, and the Japanese move in closer, but not before Jim emerges from behind, mowing several of the soldiers down with the gun he stole from the straggling soldier. Jim takes a hit to the shoulder, but not before taking out the remaining soldiers. Pike tends to the wounded villagers, and Jellicoe starts bandaging up Jim. Act 4. Earl Crow is giving the chiefs a dressing down for their actions. The chiefs explain that their actions were merely concluding a treaty with their Chinese allies here. Jim was just looking for apples. They didn't want the colonel to think that there was any lack of gratitude on their part, but once they mop up, this place is off limits for the troops. All this village wants is just a little privacy. Earl Crow is not having their nonsense. He commands Captain Pike to report to his commanding officer and for Lieutenant Jellicoe to do the same. Earl Crow says that once Jim gets out of the dispensary, he'll keep him so busy he's not going to have time to get in any trouble. And by the way, he needs to come by Colonel Crow's tent when they get back to base. He's got something for him, which he is to accept without a parade. Jim thinks he can handle that. Now, as for this Joint Chiefs malarkey, anytime that I am on this island and you want to fall off a bridge, my field number is George Baker 8. Yes, sir. The villagers give the chiefs a fond farewell, waving to them as they leave the village. The chiefs lament that were it not for certain rules in a few high places, this could be the loveliest of wars. But here's the kicker. Tapioca gave them exactly what they asked for when he helped them track down Jim, but now they can't enjoy the beautiful village, and he still gets that ice machine. They ought to take out an insurance policy against stupidity. Insurance? That's it! They spend the rest of their walk home plotting out all the military-specific things that they could insure against. The end.
Very well done, Ashley. I will say that when you mentioned that the village people were on the defensive, that immediately gave me a very different mental picture than what actually happened in the episode.
Well, you know, I wrote it down, and then I realized what I wrote down, and I giggled, and then I was like, in the Navy, ba, 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 in the Navy. And so, you know, the chiefs and the village people, I'm imagining the football team and the village people, which is an even better mental image of them fighting off like the soldiers.
It's either that or one hell of a halftime show. I'm just saying.
Hey, that's it. That's it.
So,
all right.
Yeah, again, very well done on this, especially since, as I mentioned in trivia, the beginning of the pilot, and it seems like it's a few minutes, it is AWOL.
Yeah.
And so it is really challenging, you know, I found watching this, trying to figure out who's who, what's going on, and get up to speed really quickly. I mean, we have kind of an unfair advantage in that we have the documentation that tells us who is who and what's going on.
Listen, if we didn't have that, I wouldn't have known who was who, other than, like, Jim was Jim, and he's the only blonde one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
unless you know the background, it's pretty hard to figure out why things are suddenly so tense. You know, here's your medal.
I don't want my medal.
Now, when they are in the mess, marveling over Irvine's Rube Goldberg ice maker, which is a fantastic prop, I have to say.
It is pretty great. When I saw it, I was like, that can't actually work. They're pulling one over on this guy.
Yeah, and then they do indeed show it working, so, okay.
Yep.
The build-up to the attack and then them taking fire, even though there is a build-up to it, and they're like, oh, friend or foe, it's really jarring when it happens.
Yeah, because the sound editing is loud.
Yeah.
The camera, like, rattles, the lights flicker on and off, so yeah, you feel like, oh, snap, they just got hit.
Yeah. And it reminded me of a little bit of the 5 O'Clock Charlie episode of MASH, only less funny.
Mm-hmm.
And the script goes pretty dark in a few places, such as the line, "There's absolutely nothing hypothetical about what I would have to do to a deserter."
Yeah. Like, ooh.
Okay. Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So, quite a bit later, I just got engrossed and kind of forgot to take really extensive notes here. But I did have to note this one. How long are these guys going to stare at the bathing girls?
They looked at those ladies for an uncomfortably long time.
I do declare they are making pervy Pit Karen look like a gentleman.
Truly, didn't even bother to make themselves known to the ladies. Didn't say, "Oh, I'm intruding on somebody's bath time. I should back away." It's, hazard of having to go bathe in a river, I suppose, or the pond or wherever.
Yeah, but I think the only thing these guys didn't do was break out binoculars.
Thereabouts, yeah. He even makes the comment, "Oh, just notice the eyes. They're Asian eyes." And he's like, "Oh, you finally looked at the eyes?" I'm like, "Oh,
yeah,
yeah."
Okay, well,
I'm like, "Oh, I guess this is pushing the boundaries of family TV hour."
yeah, and like we said, this pilot did not sell. There may be multiple reasons for that.
Right.
Once we are on the mountain, was I the only one a little uncomfortable with how high the stereotypes were piled for the indigenous characters?
Yeah, they definitely pushed that boundary as far as they could and then some.
Yeah, and some of them were kind of comedy stereotypes, and it seemed like the cast relished doing that rather than. I'm sure many of them had served their time being Japanese bad guy number 3 in the background of other things. And so this was like, oh, hey, we actually get to do some acting. Probably a saving grace for them.
Right.
But still, boy, it got poured on thick here. And I was just like, well, this isn't great.
Yeah, I have to wonder. I wasn't able to look up any of these folks playing the indigenous characters or the Chinese characters. Did they get folks of actually those heritages to play these roles, or are, we need Asian person to fill this role?
I did not dig very deep in there, but I have a feeling we know the answer to that, and it is the latter answer. It is, you'll do. Unfortunately. You look Asian, you'll do.
Yeah.
It's, I feel for everyone who got drafted into service in this movie in those parts. But again, like I said, they get to play good people.
Yeah.
They get to not be background bad guy number 8.
Right.
They probably were like, oh yeah, hell yeah, sign me up for some of that. And I get to actually act and do funny things. Because dude and his wife, okay, they are legitimately funny. The stereotypes get kind of cringy.
Yeah.
But they are genuinely funny. They're a cute couple.
They are cute. Okay, I did just look. I don't know how to say this guy's name, unfortunately. H.T. Seng.
Okay.
It's spelled T-S-I-A-N-G, who played Wong. He is actually from China.
Okay. Good on them.
So, okay, good. Yay. And unfortunately does not list to play. Oh, no, here's Mrs. Wong. She is from Hawaii.
I figured there were a lot of people in here who looked really more of Polynesian descent than necessarily what we consider Eastern.
Right.
And, it's a Pacific island. I guess you can get away with that. But again, I don't think the casting director was looking too close.
No, probably not. It took me several times watching this particular pilot episode to really get a handle on who everyone was. And, part of this, we were missing like maybe the first 5 minutes or so of the episode. It's black and white. All these guys look the same. And by that, I mean all of our leads pretty much. Like James Stacy sticks out because he's blonde. But like Pike and Jellicoe, as I accidentally said in the recap, I was like, Pike/Jellicoe. Oh, wait, I wrote that because I didn't know which one said it because they look exactly the same to me, which is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to clock, okay, which one is the short one and which one is the tall one. That's the only real distinguishing feature.
Right, and if they're seated, good luck.
Yeah, so, okay, so please, everyone, understand, we are not talking about the indigenous characters and saying, oh, they all look the same. No, we're talking about the American characters. They all look the same.
They do. Which, I mean, honestly, I think that says more about, like, casting in the 60s.
Yeah.
Than it does anything else. Is like, here is generic handsome dude number 5. We'll cast him in this. I think, like, the only other observation I had is, like, I don't know, I found, like, Colonel Crow's voice, like, this guy's a colonel? He sounds like my kid neighbor next door. Like, I don't know, I feel like if you got to cast somebody as your colonel, he needs to sound more intimidating and gruff than your 3 leads.
Yeah, he was squeaky.
Yeah.
He reminded me of a local television director I used to know who, at the slightest sign of stress, started going up octaves.
Yep.
And until finally he's in all of our headsets going, what the hell is going on?
Whoa, Mickey Mouse. I didn't know you were running today's show.
He was a little bit of a southern drawl away from, golly, Andy. Yes, sir, Colonel. Okay, so now that the village people have attacked, and we've recovered from that, time to take on slightly weightier topics.
Yep.
Okay, the boat skipper is writing a letter home to his sweetheart, who will be 18 in 2 years.
By the time he gets home.
This guy looks 30.
I was about to say, how old's this dude supposed to be?
Yeah, he is angling for lieutenant commander stripes. Okay, maybe this was a fairly common thing during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a thing we need to bring back, and it just reads really different now. And you know what? That would have been a really funny start to the scene if they just left the girl's age out of the conversation.
Right. You could have done the scene without the age.
Yeah, you could have left that piece of information off the table. Scene would have been fine.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, I get it. We are pushing more boundaries here. I'm trying to remember, is this the first thing we watched that is for an hour time slot?
I think so. I don't remember anything being an hour. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, now, I think we read Defiance County and decided, okay, this is an hour worth of script.
Yeah. That one was probably an hour, yeah. But as for watching with our eyes, no, I don't think we've had anything that was an hour long.
Yeah, so we really are venturing into new frontiers here. And with that in mind, I went into this thinking, okay, we've got 3 main characters who are good at different things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to watch this with an eye toward figuring out who is Proto-Kirk and who's Proto-Spock and who's Proto-McCoy, because surely this dynamic will be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not that easy.
It isn't, because they're all like a little bit of all of them.
Yeah. I think this is a step down that road, but it's only one step.
Yeah. I mean, I think if anything, I do think James T. is a little more Kirk than the other 2. But maybe only philosophically, because I keep thinking of the line, we have chosen not to kill today.
Yeah, and he has definitely chosen not to kill until the last reel.
Right.
And then he kills a lot.
Then he's like frickin' Rambo.
Yeah, and so I will have thoughts on that later.
Yeah.
The character sketches that Gene wrote in the series pitch, they really kind of have more character than anyone does in the pilot. This felt like it was episode 4 of something.
Yeah, like we're walking in. We barely get an introduction to these guys. Like, you get a little more about Jim in this, but not really about the other two. By the way, Pat Harrington Jr. would have been 33.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Schneider.
Yeah, no thank you. Anyway, proceeds.
It just feels like it's not the pilot. It feels like it's halfway through the season. And so Gene may have had a fix on who he wanted these guys to become over time. Irvine has the arc here. Mm-hmm. The other two guys remain untouched by any of these events.
Right.
But you can't really do that with a pilot. You can't assume you're going to get the series order and you're going to hold the good stuff back for the series.
Right.
The pilot has to show some of the potential of where this can go. You have to play some of the cards to get to the next round. So it's kind of weird. We've read pilot scripts by Gene before that we thought were amazing, and how did this not get made?
Right.
This is what I'm always wondering, how did it get made?
Yeah, I mean, other than these kinds of stories were very popular at the time, so yeah, why not? What's one more? Let's throw it out there. I do appreciate that it did try to be different. You know, A.P.O, of course, that is a post office. I was expecting a post office. There was no post office.
Well, it wasn't letter perfect.
But I was anticipating a little more, especially after, reading your trivia, a little more along the lines of MASH, and that wasn't exactly what we got.
Yeah, the pitch document makes it sound like this thing is going to be a laugh a minute, and this is pretty heavy.
There's definitely a lot of heavy stuff going on.
Yeah, because our one guy who gets any character development here, Irvine, we're told he's a sensitive guy. He's tired of killing. He goes AWOL to find this settlement that they keep calling Shangri-La, and that keeps making me want to go listen to the ELO song of the same name.
Right.
And so he is going to this paradise, and he's just going to chill until he becomes the Terminator.
Right.
And then we chase that down with a comedy ending, and it's just like the tone is all over the place in here. And I don't know if that's the fault of the script, because we have a lot of documents, but not the actual script.
Right.
I don't know if this is something that was introduced by the director or the actors, that just not getting it, or if the script was also this really weird blend that you hear the gears grinding, basically. We're going to be funny. Oh, now we're going to be super violent. Oh, now it's time for a laugh. It's tonally odd. And
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we are piling up reasons this didn't sell.
Yeah, definitely a tonal roller coaster, for sure. I will say, I think there is some interesting discussion to be had about, yes, let us by any means necessary choose to be peaceful and not violent. But what do you do when you're forced into a situation like this where loss of life would be prevented by stopping these people? And there's only one way to stop them.
And that's to unleash Irvine.
And yeah, I'd say let's to go, Rambo, Terminator, insert Stallone character here. Stallone / Chuck Norris / Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, it's a weird transition for that character. And the thing is, we're picking that out of, yes, there's a discussion to be had. Is this script having that discussion? No. I think we're just earmarking it as this is something it could have done.
Yeah.
But it barely scratches the surface. Yeah,
it doesn't quite get there. I appreciate that it's trying, but I don't think the ending of the episode really matches that.
Yeah, especially not the comedy epilogue. That completely takes the air out of the room for the seriousness of everything that has happened so far.
Yeah.
Right, Ashley, we've shipped out, we've served our tour of duty with A.P.O. 923. Did you find a message here that you didn't have to, pull really hard out of a well that is in the show?
No, like I said in discussion, I think they're maybe trying to talk about, pacifism and can we settle these kinds of conflicts without bloodshed, without violence? But I don't think we quite get there. I think this is a miss.
I think it's a swing and a big miss. It's it's never a good day when you've got to arm the village people. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You don't want to have to arm the village people, even though they are in the Navy. I will say I do think this trio of characters is interesting with Jimmy and Pike and Jellicoe. I think they are an interesting trio that I would have liked to have watched in a show. I think they're kind of fun to watch together. I think they play off well with each other, but I don't think that this was the story to try to sell them.
Yeah, I wanted to see them in another one of the episode sketches that Gene included in the pitch. This one feels like it's trying really hard to be about the cost to a man's soul of fighting people and taking lives, until it isn't. And, it feels like if this was a modern thing, okay, we would be talking about Irvine's PTSD.
Yeah.
And
because he's clearly rocking some.
But the fact that he is able to arm the village people and then just turn into a one-man killing machine and go Rambo Rochambeau on all these guys. What was the message? I don't think there is one. And I really don't think that there was going to be a longer game to explore this, because this was 1960s TV. You did not have the kind of serialization that is baked into the cake today. So, yeah, A.P.O. 923 is neither fish nor fowl. I kind of see why CBS looked at this and went, maybe not.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because, like I said, I think we are on the road to Star Trek, but it's not a very big step.
Yeah. About the only thing that gets to Star Trek are the names.
Yeah.
And even then, Jellicoe's kind of a potential happy accident or a loving homage to something that never saw the light of day.
Special thanks to the Roddenberry Repertory players. Our cast this week featured Mike Richards as Captain Pike and Alan Simonis as Colonel Crow. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Facebook at MissionLogPod. And please remember, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and Mission-Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment.
On the next Gene-ology, to wear a badge. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Tom Kozak, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, and Paul Shadwell.
We'll be back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.